Hello everyone, welcome to Nana's Tiny Kitchen. Today we're going to do pizza! Woohoo! Okay, I get a lot of requests, even from family members that are like, okay, how do you get that dough? Now, I consider myself a pizza snob. Like, I moved from Long Island to upstate New York, and that's one thing that we don't have up here is probably good pizza. So I did find one local place and I started going in there and I made friends with one of the guys who made really good pizza. And I noticed that it had a lot to do with the hands, never mind the recipe, but you would go in the evening when he wasn't there and same recipe, different pair of hands making that pizza and it wouldn't come out the same. So I decided one day to take him aside and I said, okay, what is the secret to this dough? I've been trying to do this dough for so many years and it never comes out like the pizzeria. And he said, well, there's a couple of things that you have to do. And he was awesome. So I'm going to walk you through them real quick. Okay. When we put our dough together, I had made a batch earlier. After it's done mixing, whether you use your mixer with the hook thingy or you use the bread machine, if you use the bread machine, don't let it get to the heat cycle. After it goes through the two of the mixing and it stops to rest and then it heats up, you take it out. Okay? And this is what it's going to look like. This is going to go in my refrigerator and proof for 24 to 48 hours, depending on how much I want pizza. But 48 hours would be ideal. 24 if you really, really want pizza. It's still going to come out good. But what I did was I took it out of the bread machine and I put some oil around the inside of this and around the top. And I'm going to put the cover on it, stick this in the refrigerator until 24, 48 hours I want to make pizza. But you know your dough is good when you give it the pinch test. If you pinch it as it's mixing, when it's coming to an end, and it kind of goes back to shape, then you know you're ready. If it's too sticky, add a little bit more flour. If it's too pinchy and it kind of stays, add a tiny bit more water, but a little at a time. So this is going to go in my refrigerator, and now I'm going to walk you through the recipe on how to get to this point. Okay. Let me find room. Hence the tiny kitchen. Okay, now we got, get your pen and paper. 1 1/4 cup of warm water. Not hot, warm to the touch. 1 packet or 2 1/4 teaspoon of dry yeast. Not quick rise yeast, regular dry yeast. Now you could use, like I use Platinum, you could use Fleischmann's, what's the other one? Red Star, I think, as long as it's not the quick rise one. So I'm going to take one of these packets and dump it right into this 1 1/4 cup of warm water. Now, this is the point where you're going to know whether your yeast is viable or not. And you add to this 1 1/4 cup of water and the yeast, you're going to add 2 teaspoons of sugar. Two teaspoons of sugar. I'm going to give this a stir, a light stir, not too aggressive. And then I'm going to set my timer for 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, the yeast should start feeding and it should start growing. If it stays flat after 10 minutes, you know the yeast is no good. Sometimes even when you get a good date, like this says July 20, 2022, sometimes you'll get a batch that's not any good. And this is the test that's going to tell you whether it's good or not. So we're going to set that timer and we'll be back in a few. Okay, I can't get this camera thing straight. I do not know why, but it is not cooperating with me at all today. But our yeast is blooming beautifully. Like you could see, it's not flat. It actually came alive. And this was the 1 1/4 cup of warm water with 2 teaspoons of sugar. In my mixer, I already have 4 cups of bread flour. Now you can use all-purpose flour if you want to. I prefer to use a bread flour. Some people do a half and half. Bread flour has a lot more gluten in it. Well, about 1.5% more gluten, something like that. So you get a little bit of that elasticity. So 4 cups of unbleached bread flour went into the mixer. Now I'm going to add a teaspoon of salt, a tablespoon of olive oil, a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. And now I'm ready to add my mixture in here. I'm going to make a little hole in the middle so it doesn't touch the salt right away, because the salt will kill it. There's my timer for my 10 minutes. I'm going to pour this right in here. And I already have my mixer set on dough, and I'm going to start it and let it go. Now, after it goes through the first cycle of mixing, you'll be able to tell whether you need a little bit more, a tiny bit more water or a tiny bit more flour. Those ingredients you have to be careful with, especially the water. You have to add it a tiny bit at a time. It may seem like not enough, but trust me, if your dough comes out and it's sticky after that first mixing cycle, then you'll know that you added too much water and you need a little bit of flour. But with this recipe, 4 cups of flour to 1 1/4 cup of water, you should be perfect. So that's going to get mixed. And now for the pizza sauce, I just took, well, I grow my own tomatoes and jar up the sauce myself. So if you go to the supermarket and you buy a can of crushed tomatoes, make sure it's smooth and not chunky. We don't want chunky sauce. You just add 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Put your sauce in. You add a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of garlic or garlic powder, a teaspoon and a half of oregano, a 1/4 teaspoon of basil, and I do put in a teaspoon of sugar for anybody who suffers from, you get like agita if you have sauce. That's a good way to get rid of that, because that will cut the agita, or acid reflux, as they say. Or if you take one potato, a small potato, and you peel it and you drop it in the sauce and you let it cook with your sauce, it'll actually absorb the acid, and you'll actually be able to eat that potato, no problem. You won't get acid reflux from the potato itself. I don't know why, but that also works if you don't want to add the sugar. I like adding the sugar because I like to enhance the little bit of sweetness that the tomatoes already have. This has been cooking for about a half an hour covered on a low simmer. Now I'm going to take this cover off, and the reason why I want to do this is because I don't want my sauce runny. I want it on the thick side. I want to boil off as much of that water as I can before I add it to the dough, because when I put it in the oven, the pizza's going to cook very quickly. Now, if you have, a sauce that has too much water in it, what's going to happen is you're going to get soggy dough, and we don't want that. So we're going to give this a stir, and I'm going to leave this, I'm going to get this uncovered for about another half hour. I'll just keep my eye on it. I'll let it go for about a half an hour on low, uncovered, and just keep, stirring and keep an eye on it. If it seems like it's thick enough, great. And then you're going to stick this in your refrigerator to make your pizza for either 24 or 48 hours. Now, the reason why the young man at the pizzeria told me that it's really important to do that with the dough is it stretches so much easier, and it comes out nice and light and fluffy when it cooks in the oven. Because I always noticed that when they're making the pizza, they always have on the side, they always have a stack of, little things of dough, so they're ready to go, pie after pie after pie. And he said to me, Lisa, that dough I made on Wednesday, and it happened to be a Friday. And he goes, and that's even for me too soon. He goes, I like to let it go at least 2 to 3 days in the refrigerator so it proofs nice and slow. It'll still rise, but it'll rise nice and slow, and that's what you want. So this, what I'm making today, is for the pizza that I'm either going to make tomorrow or the following day. So this is going to go, and let's see, I got my sugar, I got everything in here, and we're going to pop this open just to make sure my dough is getting mixed up really good. It looks good. It's still a little shiny on the top, which means it still has to get more of the incorporated flour along the sides. But as soon as it gets done after the second mixing, because between the first and the second, that's when you're going to be able to tell whether you need a little bit more water or you need a little bit more flour. But before, when it gets to that last mix and it stops, don't let it get hot. You take it right out, and like I showed you earlier, you put it in an oiled, you take a container and you put olive oil around, and on the top, rub it all around, and even in the inside of the top of the container so it doesn't stick. It shouldn't stick. And then you're going to put it in your refrigerator. And then when we meet again, we're going to be making our pizza. This is just part 1 to the part 2 series that I'm going to be doing. Thanks a lot. I hope you appreciate this, and I hope you make great pizza. Till next time.